Good evening and welcome to Lots Drawn. Today we have a very special guest, and my pleasure to introduce Dr. Levis Guy Obiakor. And Levis, apart from being my friend, she is responsible for that great project that we call the Rockley Bay Project. And today I want to talk a bit about it, and we're going to connect some dots and really get down into the background to the project, what's happening with it. We had several years ago, we had a program called Salute to Holland, celebrating the Dutch and the war with the Tobago 1677. And today, Levis, let me just welcome you inside Lots Drawn. This is our podcast where we try to talk about those things that are important to tourism, culture, the environment, and so on of Tobago. So let me just welcome you, Dr. Guy, and I'll call you Levis for this conversation that we're going to have, all right? Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Good.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's tell our listeners, let's go back a bit, because I recall when we started several years ago. Tell us when we started, and also what it entailed at that time before Dr. Bacharov came on board and so on. Talk to us, give us a little background, and kind of bring us forward on the project.
Well, it's about this project is it's 9 years old, and it started with a request from Professor Bacharov and the University of Connecticut. They just wanted to have a link with someone in Tobago, and I was suggested that I can, as they told me, make things happen. So that's how it started, and they came, we went to the port, and I made some inquiries with the former chief secretary over London, and he was very gracious, together with his then Secretary of Tourism, Culture and Transportation, who was Mr. Oswald Williams.
Right.
And there began the process. They were the ones who gave the seed money for us to construct the building. And as a matter of fact, there was an election going on at the time. So I was kind of leery as to whether they would continue with the project if they won, whether they would give us the funds. And, it was really a touch and go situation. I remember actually calling him on the campaign trail and asking him, please, is this gonna go?
Yeah,
and he says, yes, as long as we win, this stuff is gonna go. So we continued along, and we constructed a building which was 4,800 square feet. And that is where we are now. It's a conservatory. We were hopeful that that conservatory would be used to really work on the artifacts. We would bring them up from the seabed, and we would work on the artifacts themselves. So this is just in a nutshell, just a brief overview.
Right, but I think what's important, Levis, is just give us a bit of detail about the artifacts. Why, when we bring them up, we've got to have a conservator to definitely deal with preserving them, and why we had to put them back even after we did the photographs and so on. I think that's really good education for listeners.
But let's realistically, you have the material is you have clay,
right?
You have wood, and you have metal. The metal is a bit easier, but the clay and the wood, the clay is has absorbed the salt for about 377 years.
Yes.
So we need to extract, the word is extract. We need to extract the salt from the clay, also from the wood, and it has to come out in a slow process. You just, you have to have it remain in particular concentrations of whatever chemicals you're going to put with it. I am not an archaeologist. Right. I am an international lawyer. So therefore, this is just some rudimentary explanation of what should happen. And the conservatory was built in such a way that we could have had a lab there. That was the intent.
Right. So, I know the whole project of having the I call it an archaeotourism project. And forgive me because that's how I see this project as one of the big archaeotourism initiatives that we have to pursue. But beyond that, give us a little bit about the Dr. Bashvarov and the work that they did and where we are now.
Okay, what we started doing is the excavation. What they were looking at is to see where the Dutch ships were.
Right.
In the battle, you had the battle out at sea, but the tides and currents brought it closer to the port. And he was explaining to me that where we have the land now, where the port is, that whole area is reclaimed land.
Yes.
So a lot of artifacts were found under the port building itself. And we were discussing a couple of days ago that where the fishing depot is,
Right.
also to where the ferry transit back and forth, that route coming into the harbor, there should be the French ships. Will probably be, yes, the wrecks. They are thinking that that's where the French ships are. However, we're discussing the Dutch. The Dutch ships are further to the western side of Tobago, on the western, I'm going to say it of Tobago, the western side of the port.
Of the port, yeah.
Yes, the western side of the port. The flagship, the Hughes de Groningen, that particular ship, we are thinking that we found that ship, but we have to do the timber excavation, and we had a dendrochronologist who is Professor Nigel Nailing from the University of Wales, who collected samples. We were looking at it, but that should be the flagship of the Dutch flagship. Whereas the French flagship, they had like 13 ships, and they came in. They were both set of ships were burnt to a crisp. Well, not all of them, but you still have timbers, but to the waterline, they were all burnt. So we had about 3,000 people on board who perished that day on March 3rd in 1677.
Including children.
Children, women, and we will not forget the slaves.
The slaves,
Yes.
the children,
Because,
and the woman.
yes, because the slaves, the children, and the women were taken on board because they thought that would be the safest place for them rather than leaving them on land, but it turned out not that way.
Complete disaster.
A complete disaster.
Yes. Let me just introduce. With me in studio is Josh. We call him Josh. He's actually Josh Powder, and he's a genius in his own right. But it's important that the young people also be part of this discussion. And Josh, I know you may want to pump in here and talk to Dr. Guy about what we've been talking about on the port and what's happening with the Rockley Bay Project before I continue.
Yeah, sure thing. A pleasure to be here.
Yes,
I think my question would be surrounded around youth and youth involvement in any of the projects. This, of course, but any of the projects we may come to discuss over time, John, here on the podcast. My question is, where do you see the involvement of youth in any form or fashion? What can we do as a part of preservation, maybe getting involved, and also if you can speak to if that is something that you see youth currently involved in. So in other words, if we're not involved, how do we get how do we get in? Is there space for us there?
Yes, there's a lot of space, because what I started to do is I had in 2013, I had about 50 students who would come. I started a summer program, and it was called Oceans and Technology, a Sea of Learning.
I remember that, yes.
Right. That was the name of the project. We started on the port. We couldn't have, there were too many students, so we moved to Cove. And that is where we had every summer, every Christmas, every Easter, we had like 200 young people teenagers down to the age of like 10. And getting back to that, is that the students were learning the 3D photography of all the artifacts that we found. I had, from the funds that I got from the THA, I purchased iPads. So the kids were using these iPads. We had another donor who helped us, and the kids were using these iPads with the help of a Japanese company to do the 3D photography. So if you look at the website www.tobagoshipwrecks.com, that would show you the 3D photography that they were taken under the supervision of Yamakaze. They were learning how to do this. So because I am very interested in having young people be a part of the process. To the point where we had different disciplines coming out of. They did the diving, they did underwater photography. All the kids, we couldn't go underwater, but the gentleman brought his cameras in. They were exposed to the other cameras on the port. So the kids learned a lot. They looked at lots of different disciplines and how it's the applications to underwater. We are on land, but the applications, we would have them go out to the reef, to the lagoon with the iPads, with cameras, and have photographs taken.
If you don't mind, just for the benefit of the viewers and for myself as well, when you say photography, can we safely assume, John, that this is like a specialized type of photography that is done in a very specific way due to the nature of the project, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Because the cameras are completely different. The housing on the cameras, it is just completely different. It's just beautiful. So we did the applications on land, and then they would go to the beach and see, he would go in and have them have a look at how it's done. But one of the major reason that I did this project, that I got involved, it was for the young people. And when I got so frustrated that I was not getting funding to have these artifacts recovered, I resorted and I threw myself voluntarily, full time, into engaging the students. We had Bishop's High School, we had the Signal Hill, we had Scarborough Secondary, and Signal Hill. The students at Bishop's were exposed to the dendrochronology, so they can have an idea of what is a dendrochronologist. We also did a dating of that tree in Runnymede, the silk cotton tree.
Silk cotton tree.
So
we lost the other one, so we've got to find a way to deal with this one. Yeah.
Yes. So that is the reason why I am always engaging students. I know John always says, don't give up, Levis. Do not give up. And these are the individuals, the people who supported me along the way when there was no funding. And actually what I did, I am on the board at THTI. And every month, in order to support this project, I use that money from my stipend to support this project, to purchase things, to ensure that this project does not die.
Wow, that is passion.
I have, because when I start something, I want it to see it through to completion. And it really bothers me, that things are just not going the way it should.
You will recall, just before we come to the conservator, because I think that one is very important to me. I know that a lot of photography was done, and so if you go on TobagoShipwrecks.com, I mean, I go there all the time, you can still see a lot of good pottery and some mugs and pipes and, that when we came to getting the conservator, we had a problem, and just kind of lay that out for us, because the conservator is necessary. We need it.
Okay. What I hope to do initially, we would interview for a conservator. There was a young lady, Eleonora Peaver, who came on the dive with us the following year, and she said she is interested. She came for the specific purpose to see if she liked Tobago. Her family, her partner was into IT. So he said he can work from anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter. So that was a match made in heaven. So we have to do the due diligence. And we interviewed, we did the virtual interviews. And well, at the end of the day, regardless, she was the most experienced because she had a PhD. And she was also coming out of London, a specific project. She came out of that project, that training project, the Mary Rose Trust. So she was versed in this whole thing. And the THA, the US government gave $3 million for this project, with the caveat that that was the Ambassador's Cultural Fund. The caveat is that the THA must pay for the conservator. And that was the only problem we had. The whole thing dragged on. Miss Peaver took another position as a conservator in Norway. So that was the end of that conservator.
I remember that. I was in the vortex then with you on that, really fighting hard to see if we could solve that problem. Yeah. Better days are coming. So let's let's hope we can get that, because that for me is kind of critical to move the program and the project forward. Don't you think?
It is critical because you have artifacts that have stayed in pristine condition. We have a Bellarmine jar with the three great commanders on it, and it's about 14 inches high. And it's in pristine condition, and that's a clay jar. We had to take it back. So at the end of the day, we want to have these things brought to the surface and restored. But at this point, I don't know if a conservator would be the best fit for this whole project. Because what I am trying to engage is the University of Texas A&M.
Right.
They have a foremost conservatory, and they're experienced in doing this stuff. So we have cataloged over 300 artifacts. And what we intend to do, my intention is because Texas A&M is part of our university system. It's Texas A&M, University of Connecticut, and the University of Wales. These are the three universities that have joined together with the Ambassador's Cultural Fund, who assisted the Dutch in us doing this whole project. So if we take these artifacts where Dr. Bachvarov can oversee the whole process to Texas A&M, they would be able to take care of it. And in the end, we bring it back and display it in a museum.
Yeah, yes.
I was hoping to do a maritime museum because we could engage all the artifacts from the maritime, all the battles that are there. We can put it in one specific place. It doesn't have to be a whole building, but probably a room or a floor.
Yeah. But even beyond that, you remember the THA did help sponsor the Tobago 1677 movie. Well, they call it docudrama, right? And all like that can now be utilized even inside of that museum. Like when you go away and you put the headphones on and you can watch, or that I've gone to places where you see a big room you can go in, like a movie, a small theater, and you can look at it. The shows are programmed for 1 hour every 2 hours, and it becomes something very interesting that can add to the education of the younger folks,
As part, you could just have uniforms from that battle, from that docudrama, the library, the Tobago Library Services.
And they're still at shop, by the way.
Well, yeah, we can use them.
Yes.
The Tobago Library Services, they did a display for me, and we had over like 3,500 kids pass through to see the exhibit because they constructed a boat of paper.
Yes.
I mean, I was just amazed that, remember that, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
Right. So it's quite amazing. And we had a showing of the the movie upstairs, we pulled out just a small portion of it.
Right,
I,
right.
I, I tried with the Division of Education to have every child in Tobago of a specific age view that movie.
Yes.
Movie Town was very much involved, and they said yes, but it was the problem was to get funding from the THA for that project. So, it seems like I'm hopeful.
No, no,
I
I'm hopeful. The the article you did send me, I like the heading, the graveyard of the of the Tobago. It was a kind of interesting headline. Almost made me think of dark tourism, but it was a different kind of dark tourism. It was more. I'm going again. I'm pulling you back to this archaeotourism gift because I remember when we did have the salute to Holland. We did partner with the ambassador at that time, and we had a ship come in, and they were very interested in the bronze cannon that is on the port right now.
yes.
Right? And I remember Mr. Wilson saying, well, that bronze cannon will never be leaving here, And again, a lot of people sit on it, they pass it, but they don't understand what is the value of some of these artifacts that we have right here, in Tobago that we walk past. And also the potential for if you have a museum like the one you're talking about, what it can do also for tourism.
Especially when you have KLM is returning to Tobago,
All
we
right.
can have a system where the advertisement is geared towards lots of history professors,
Yes.
enthusiasts would come to see these things, these artifacts. This is because when we had we had a lecture, and that particular lecture explored the Dutch coming to Tobago. And there is a list. There is a list, a manifest of all the people who came, who were colonists here. So maybe some person would say, oh, I had a relative who, how many years ago, migrated to Tobago and
Yes.
perished here, and they would just like to come. The Houston Clonigan, that ship, it sailed from the port of Vlissingen. And the students in Vlissingen, the municipality of Vlissingen, I had contact with them, the library, they are engaged in this project. They are not visible on the screen for the chats and the listing, but you have around one screen, you have 60 people looking at our lecture series. You have the museum, the Maritime Museum in Curacao. You have the Jubilee Library in St. Martin, Dutch again,
Connections.
and you have Professor Martijn Manders, who is the director of the Ministry of Culture in the Netherlands. You also have Paul Verbeek. He is the director of the museum in Vlissingen. That is the port from which the ship came. That's where the ship was built. So initially, what we plan to do is a twinning of the cities, twinning of Scarborough and Vlissingen. These are some of the things that I've been working on. I've been explaining to former secretaries what can be done. But I mean, it's like, it's a struggle. It's a struggle.
But Doc, Levis, I'll call you Levis on this.
Yeah.
You realize that you're hitting all the things, right? Because there's a connection to diaspora tourism, there's the archaeotourism, there's the education part of it, and we have a whole heap of angles that we can certainly look to as some of the niches that can certainly put Tobago on the map. And I think today we heard where the new chief secretary has now added antiquities to the naming of the division of tourism, culture, antiquities, and transportation. And I thought that was an amazing thing, because after going to Little Tobago about 3 weeks ago. What day we went? Yeah, that's about 2 weeks or 3 weeks with Newton George. And there we were able to see another great place, right, for Tobago as another product,
Yeah.
all right, in terms of birding and adventure. And for us, if you add all of these things, we have several parts of Tobago that now become really, really special. And I am very, very passionate about this one. And really, I'm really happy that you're pursuing what you're doing. And I get the feeling that with the naming and renaming of the division by adding antiquities, there is going to be a focus on this whole thing of heritage tourism, archaeotourism, artifacts, all of those things, and how we can start to monetize and look at how we can have people come here to look at that. Your thoughts?
What makes me very angry, and what, because of my passion for this whole project, is that I was sent to UNESCO, a UNESCO cultural archaeological for recovery, because of my discipline in law, international law, looking at how artifacts are treasured and what are the limitations. What is particularly instructive is that I am being sent there every 2 years, and I come back, I give a report on what I saw, what can be done, and nothing happens. It just makes me feel like I just went on a trip to Paris. I don't need to go to Paris on a trip, to shop or whatever. I went to work, and I must be engaged. I must come back. And what I learn, I want to impart. I write a report. I want to see somebody at least call me in and say, well, how do we do this? Or, well, we can't afford to do this, or we can't afford to do that. But I just send in the report, and that is what obtains in Tobago. And it's a sad situation, because we won't learn. We won't be able to teach our young people how to do things, and that's something that's it's
a very valid point. I mean,
yes.
Dr. Keatness, I always use his words: implementation deficit disorder, IDD. Which is the problem is, how do we implement? And I think the more you think about governance, and in any place, the idea is, how do you take what do you have, and you do a plan, and you do a report, but really, how do you take it and implement it? That for me is the more critical role. And I mean, from the signals you're hearing, it looks as though this area of archaeotourism and heritage tourism, artifact tourism, all of these, there's going to be an emphasis on that for tourism and culture. And I think that augurs well.
It does. It augurs well, because you have the Tobago Heritage and Cultural Society, which is led by Mr. Gabriele Gaetano.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And they are doing a significant amount of work, going through the forests and all they're looking at finding old graveyards, gravestones. He's cataloging things. For example, you look at the Montgomery Moravian Church. As a child, I knew there was a pipe organ. It has since been dismantled. But these are the things that we have to teach our people to treasure. My great-grandfather came from Scotland. I mean, and I kept the things that he brought. I have them. There was a chair that he brought with him from Scotland, and I think the Woodans, they just gave up. I mean, where the other relatives had that chair, I know the Woodans, the tracks on these chairs. But we have to treasure these artifacts, not only for the sake that we don't want them. If we don't want them, then it should be given to some institution that can house them. But the institution themselves must be put in place in a way that would give individuals the comfort knowing that when you donate these things, that they will be put in a place on display. For example, at the fort, I am sure I know a lot of individuals gave things, and there's a room with the things packed in there. I had a tour of it, and it's just it's in disrepair. So
Boy,
something has to be done.
yeah, and boy, I'm glad we're having this kind of discussion because, you know, when JD Elder was alive, I remember once they were moving from one place to another, and people just took the boxes of music and other things and just carried them to the dump. And JD Elder, I remember him crying, you know, because some Bantu songs he had, they were destroyed. And that was all part of of his research. I mean, at present, I am also thinking of retention in terms of the tambourine. And 2 years ago, we had the UTT people come to look at the pedagogy. How do you hold the instrument? How do you play it? How many fingers do you use? All right, how much pressure do you apply? How is it made? So that it can be documented for other people to be able to learn it as an instrument. And those are some of the things we have to now look at, how we not just preserve on the artifact side, but also the retention of some of our customs and some of the things that we have. I have done a personal project trying to highlight the tambourine when my last CD project with jazz standards in the tambourine source. And it's really playing on the tambourine instrument, be situating it in the jazz music, and also situating jazz in the jig and reel rhythms. And so far, it has been a very exciting project and getting the kind of attention. But certainly, it's a window, it's an entry point into the globalization aspect of putting attention to the tambourine. And it's the same thing I want to know, that what you are doing with this Rockley Bay Project, that it must come to life. We must finish it. Actually, when you said 9 years ago, I jumped because I thought it was less. But I was amazed that it was 9 years ago. So I think, how do we move forward now that we are hearing a shift in terms of the approach to it? How do we move forward? What would you like to see?
What I would like to see is this, since we have an opportunity now, is this new administration putting tourism and culture on the syllabus for the schools in Tobago, at least once per week, that this sort of heritage and culture and tourism be taught to students. I remember as a child being taught nutrition. You had two individuals coming to the school, I think probably once a month, to teach us nutrition. That has to be taught in the schools. That is why presently we have a bad people complain. You have tourists come here and they complain about bad customer service because young people do not have a value for the tourism. Tourism is our lifeblood. It is our bread and butter. It's our everything. And we have to, because you see that this COVID has happened and so many families are now experiencing the problems they are experiencing, the financial and social problems, because it's their livelihood is directly linked to tourism. So we have to engage the students at an early age. We are trying to do that. I'm on the board at THDI. We are trying to do customer service. But to teach someone customer service at the age of 35 or 36, it's going to be a difficult task because that sort of rude behavior is entrenched in them. You know, you see a tourist who is lost, the first thing you can do, may I help you? How may I help you? Where are you going? You know, you try to engage people so that they will come back. We are looking for return tourists. We are looking for tourists who come to Tobago to go back and tell their friends, oh, Tobago is a lovely place. You ought to go there. I think I'm going to go back. But if these people get root service, they are not going to come back. And I think the future for Scarborough Harbor Project is a future that engages young people at a very early age on the importance of tourism, the importance of the artifacts. We were slaves, many of us come from a heritage of
The history. Yeah.
yes, history. How history is taught, how it is taught, that it must be engaging. I remember Mrs. Archie, Mulder Archie, a
Mulder.
teacher at Bishop's High School. She took us one day on a history trip. We walked from Bishop's to some place in the middle of nowhere, and we all pretended that we were on this plantation stuff. It really should helped us
Yes.
to get the idea of what slavery was like, where how people lived, and as we were going, it was a hike, but it explained. We passed by Crooks River, and there she explained some of the things that would have happened there. Scarborough, the fort, the importance. So this was at 13. I will also hasten to say that I traveled on a flight at about 13 from Tobago to Port of Spain. And there was a Caribbean beat. And in that book, that little magazine, they spoke about Jews in Suriname and Curacao. And to this day, I could not get that out of my head, that I am so interested, despite the fact that I have another profession. But this is something that I wanted to learn about. And on December 17th, we will have Professor Aviva Benner from the University of Amherst, University at Amherst, University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and she is going to lecture on the Jews in Curacao. I could not forget that there was a synagogue, and the floor of the synagogue was sand.
Oh, okay.
It was sand, and I was fascinated. So when I say this, there are certain things that children remember. There are certain things that young people remember. And we as adults, as teachers, as educators, we ought to ensure that young people have that experience. Many of us are not able to travel, but in terms of bringing things to us,
Yes.
bringing
Yes.
things to them, that is the importance. That is what I want to be remembered for with the Scarborough Harbor Project, that I ensure that every Tobagonian knows that the Dutch was here at one point, that there was a battle in the Scarborough Harbor. There were slaves who died on a ship in the Scarborough Harbor. So these are, for
Yeah.
example, one of the things that Professor Boomert said, everyone was thinking that in Bloody Bay, there was this massacre and it was a bay of blood. But he said, no, it was not.
Oh,
There was
really?
no, he said it's this tree that's called, I think, the blood tree.
Ah.
Yes, and it's the timber is up in the forest in that Bloody Bay area. So it was
Okay.
floated down, and it changed the whole river into blood.
Ah.
So
You know,
she said there was no battle.
I have to tell you this, Levis. One of the things that's hitting me with the series that's going on now with the every Friday, I'm learning so much. When I heard I'm trying to remember her name now, but the word Orkinskio, for years we keep saying Orkinskio is Dutch, and she corrected it and said, no, it's not Dutch, it's Scottish. And
Yes.
I mean, I jumped, because even in school, there were people who told you that, and you are so correct that we've got to get all those things right by starting to teach the young people the right history and teaching it early. And the more I think about cultural studies and we talk about the plantation and what effect that has had on the Caribbean and the economy and creolization and plural society, all these concepts that Caribbean writers have started, well, not started, for several years. Some of our real noted scholars have really kind of told us what our identity is as Caribbean people. But I think it's important as a Tobagonian to also have a Tobago identity that falls in line with our Caribbean identity. But what you're saying there is so true, that all of these things we are talking here today contribute to that. But it has to be education, has to be a part of that.
For example, when we had our Oceans and Technology, a Sea of Learning, I had the kids, we hired a bus and we went to Arnas Vale, that the kids can see what a water wheel was. And I also took them so I said to them, this wheel is a water wheel. It was used for the cane because you had water running through here and the wheel would turn. And we also stopped by that other one that was used with the animals. There was one, a mill. So I said, these are the different ways. You have a windmill and then you have another one where the animals would go round and round. Yeah. And this is what would grind the cane. So all these areas were sugarcane fields and, we stopped at different sugar mills and stuff like that. So we have to learn so that a kid will see a mill and be able to identify this one was a windmill, this one was a water mill. Why was a windmill put in this particular area, probably near the sea? Why is a water wheel here? Because we can harness water. So these are some of the things that not only teach them, but we have to engage the students in a particular way.
So, Doc, Joshua and these guys are so much into digital. How do we, Joshua, tell us, how do we marry the technology and the digital world with all that we're talking here in terms of communication?
John, that's a very interesting question because I would go on the heels of what Barbados is doing right now with the metaverse. As you know, Facebook has this whole thing with the metaverse. I think Barbados is actually doing an embassy on metaverse. I'm just listening and hearing everything. And first off, I am actually very happy that we've seen the involvement of youth in the past, and even now that we're seeing youth wanting to be a part of it. From a technology standpoint, I would even go to say that we can actually represent what we have here in the physical, similarly to what Barbados is doing with the embassy. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be to that extent, at least initially. But we can start with something.
You can visit Tobago
exactly
through that, by seeing some of these other
exactly. And I know we have the website and we have all of these elements. But one of the things that I've been seeing even more so present due to COVID is 3D tours.
Right.
Some form of 3D tours, or even if it's not 3D, it's immersive to a certain point. And I could see us taking what we have here, and even if we don't have a physical building or physical spaces yet, to have it there, we could develop some form of tour that could give persons outside, of course at the cost of a ticket, give them the ability to have that experience with us here. So, that's just my, thoughts on that.
No, you heard that, Levis?
Yes.
You hear where the head is going?
Yes. And also in the same vein, students may not be able to travel from the eastern part of Tobago to the western side where you had a lot of windmills and that sort of stuff. But we can have the same 3D because we did the 3D. We took the Canon. We took the photographs at different angles. And we were able in that project to teach the young people to turn the camera around. We were also able to show them that the guy, when we were trying to do the mapping in the water to locate the artifacts, the guy would go out in the boat we had, the little boat we had, and he would have this particular thing mapping You can see under the water, and they're on board the boat with it, and it's on a big screen in the conservatory, because that conservatory was constructed with a library, with sleeping quarters for the professors. There was a kitchen, there was a laboratory itself to do the work with the microscope. There was also a living area that we could set up to do interviews. If anyone is interested, we had that set up really nicely to do interviews. And these are the things that, and a big hall. The big hall was the lecture hall, where we could have a screen projected upstairs on the balcony, and students can look at it. It was fascinating. It was done so that it's a multi-purpose building.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know what will happen.
I mean, I know we come down to wind down, but what's the status of the building right now? It's closed?
Yeah, the building is shuttered. We have all the equipment, and I've taken out the equipment from that was purchased by the U.S. government and the Professor Bachbarov. I have them for safekeeping.
Right.
However, all the equipment that was purchased by the THA is there, rusting away.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's there. It's rusting.
But what about the pictures and the other things we had up? What's happening with that?
The
photographs. No. Did you have some physical pictures also, or everything was digital?
Everything is digital.
Everything was digital. Okay.
Yes, everything is digital.
I thought at one point they talked about having those boards, but yeah, okay.
What we try to do is to just keep them away from the public, so that interest, to build that interest in it. If you don't see it, you'd want to see it. But if you want to see it, you have to do something to get to see it, right? You'd have to fund the project to get to see it. So, no, it's sort of like, and after a while, you get you get frustrated that these.
I know, but you have stayed the course. You've stayed the course.
Well, I'm hopeful that something is going to happen.
Yeah, I'm telling you. I mean, it was really a pleasure for me to hear that today with the antiquities, because I think that's a pretty good window and an entry point for us to really get this going. We've seen the possibilities based on what you have said. We've seen where we can certainly have education tourism, heritage tourism, archaeotourism, all of them really aligning themselves, and also linking with some of the other elements, like we talk about diaspora tourism, right? People coming back and so on. All of these things connect. And then I'm really, really interested in how we take our history to be part of who we are, right? And we also get the history right, and by having it taught in the schools in a kind of the local history taught formally. Similar to the culture. We need culture to also be taught in a local culture and tourism and all that, like you've proposed. So any closing, I mean, what I would say, Levis, is we've got to keep pressing and pushing, and we've got to now find ourselves talking to all the major players to really see the benefit and the worth. And I'm optimistic. I'm really an eternal optimist, but I'm optimistic that we can get there. Any closing comments?
My closing comment is this, is that I charge the new chief secretary. I have had the talk from the different chief secretaries. I have had the promises. What is to be done, it's not a personal effort. It's a personal effort. But I am hoping that this effort that I am making would be something that would benefit the people of Tobago, would be a benefit to the children, to the young people, for the different disciplines that come out of this whole project. It's science, social sciences, natural sciences, technology. And my charge is that the Secretary of Tourism would take up the mantle of following through on the antiquities part of this whole project. That's my prayer that I would ask.
Well, I think it's timely. I mean, our interview did not even know this will happen. This was planned for today. We heard that today. But let me thank you very much. That's what I call her Levis, but Dr. Levis Guy Obiakor, born, bred Tobagonian, and she's not here now, but certainly we want to thank her for being on Lots Drawn today. And of course, these are all curated shows, Levis, so you can look back on it after it's posted on YouTube, similar to the others. All right, folks, want to thank you very much for being with us today. I'm John Arnold, and we had Dr. Levis Guy Obiakor talking about the Rockley Bay Project, the Scarborough Project, and the possibilities for Tobago with archaeotourism, artifacts, heritage tourism, and as today, as was announced by the new administration, the area of antiquities. Want to thank you very much, and until next week, Lots Drawn. Do enjoy the rest of your evening, and be safe. Wear those masks, social distance, and of course, wash your hands. Bye-bye.